Part 29. The Prince Longs for Me Every Night After Mastering Thought Reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 281. Princess, Shuiyao was shocked when she saw this, and hurried forward to help Suiyan, who fell into the chicken coop. There was a lot of chicken shit in the chicken coop, and there was a lot of it on her clothes and hands. Suiyan almost vomited out of disgust. With the help of Shuiyao, Suiyan left Xiun Pavilion in a mess and anger. After everyone left, Chengzi finally couldn't help laughing. Sichuan is too powerful, he can actually knock concubine Shui away. Shen Shui didn't comment. In the dead of night, when Shen Shui was half asleep, she always felt a little itchy on her cheeks, not only on her cheeks, but also on her lips and neck. She snorted in dissatisfaction, scratched her neck, and turned over. As a result, she just turned over, and before she lay down, she was turned over again. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at Shen Shui's sleeping posture with her legs spread out. She was only wearing a green suspender dress. He frowned, feeling that it was not as convenient as a belly band. Even so, Shen Shui, who was sleeping very deeply, still showed no signs of waking up. Xiao Jinyan looked at her like this, his Adam's apple moved, and he leaned over to kiss her lips. Shen Shui suddenly opened her eyes, and saw a pair of narrow and long phoenix eyes, tightly closed. The black long hair tilted down, covering her face, and there was a clearness of green bamboo in the hair. Xiao Jinyan laughed softly, awake. Shen Shui rubbed her eyes. Your Highness, why did you wake me up? I dreamed of a Big Mac hamburger, and just took a bite. The result was. Shen Shui stared at Xiao Jinyan's lips for a while, as if they were swollen. No need to guess, she was not biting a Big Mac in her dream just now, but Xiao Jinyan. Usually Xiao Jinyan would climb into bed in the middle of the night, and he would not wake her up. Xiao Jinyan said hoarsely, I miss you. I have been busy all this time, and it is rare to rest early tonight. Seeing Shen Shui's sleeping posture and her exposed shoulders, she can't help but be moved. Shen Shui stared at him with a puzzled look. Your Highness sees me every day, right? Why do you still miss me? Xiao Jinyan supported the bed with one hand and stroked her delicate and fair cheek with the other hand, tracing with his fingers, this is not that. Shen Shui paused after hearing this, still not understanding the difference between what he said and what she said. She thought about it and stretched out her arms to hug Xiao Jinyan's neck. Then your Highness has seen me now, do you still miss me? Xiao Jinyan's fingers stayed on her collarbone. It is precisely because you have seen me that you miss me so much. Shen Shui pondered the meaning of the sentence, but couldn't figure it out. The ancients were indeed pedantic and implicit. Your Highness, can you just speak in plain language? Xiao Jinyan chuckled. Shen Shui said with some dissatisfaction, I am not ashamed to ask questions, but your Highness still laughs at me, which will affect my enthusiasm for learning in the future. Xiao Jinyan didn't expect that she would even bring up the question of not being ashamed to ask questions. He uttered two words lightly, have sex. Shen Shui was stunned when she heard it. After all this time, isn't it just serving the emperor in bed? Now she finally understood why the ancients talked about love and romance. Serving the emperor in bed can be piled up with a bunch of romantic words. If you just say serving the emperor in bed, I will understand. Xiao Jinyan undressed with one hand, too straightforward. Shen Shui looked at Xiao Jinyan's actions and blushed. Although it is straightforward, it is also easy to understand. It's good to know now. Xiao Jinyan possessed her again, tasting the unique sweet fragrance of peach blossoms. Generally, Xiao Jinyan didn't like to mention other things at this time. Shen Shui had mentioned it several times before, but after being tossed by Xiao Jinyan, she never mentioned it again. Otherwise, she would definitely mention that Sichuan was very powerful tonight. The candlelight in the bed was not extinguished until the fourth watch. The next day, Shen Shui was exhausted. When Xiao Jinyan came back from court, Shen Shuwei was still sleeping on the bed. He sat down beside the bed, looked at her messy hair, and tucked her hair behind her ears with his slender fingers. Xiaju, it's time to wake up. Shen Shuwei was also hungry now. She opened her eyes and saw the culprit. She glared at Xiao Jinyan, but there was no power at all. In Xiao Jinyan's eyes, it was cute. Shen Shuwei complained, "Who is the reason for this concubine?" As soon as the words came out, they were so hoarse. Xiao Jinyan nodded and admitted her fault. "It's my fault. What do you want, Xiaju? You have to prepare a crystal elbow for me anyway." Shen Shuwei thought about it, and a crystal elbow could not make up for her at all. She raised two fingers and said with an expression that was not negotiable, "No, you have to make up for it with 2 portions. Xiao Jinyan looked at her serious expression and couldn't help laughing. "Well, let someone prepare 2 crystal elbows for you for lunch." "That's better." Shen Shuwei was so happy when she thought about having 2 crystal elbows for lunch, and the pain in her body seemed to be relieved a lot. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei, who was so happy and satisfied because of 2 crystal elbows, and he suddenly thought of a question. "Crystal elbow and me, who do you choose?" Shen Shuwei blurted out without thinking, "Of course it's crystal elbow, 2 portions." Xiao Jinyan. Crystal elbow is more important than him. Xiao Jinyan never dreamed that the clown was actually himself. The air suddenly became stagnant. Xiao Jinyan reminded, "Once you finish eating the crystal elbow, it will be gone. And he is a real person who can accompany you until old age. You are so smart, right?" Shen Chu said slightly, "It's just because I want to fill my concubine's belly that it's gone." Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei saw the smile on Xiao Jinyan's mouth gradually disappear, and realized that Xiao Jinyan was not satisfied with his answer. She immediately added, "Your Highness is equally important, and you can choose all your concubines. Xiao Jinyan has been injured, and Crystal Elbow has a stronger sense of presence than him, let alone braised pork, roast mutton, hot pot, and fruits. If all these are added up, does she still have a place for herself in her heart? Your Highness, you are an adult. Don't argue with the Crystal Elbow. I've finished eating the Crystal Elbow, and there are still cherry peaches." Shen Shuwei originally wanted to comfort Xiao Jinyan, but in the end, Xiao Jinyan was injured more deeply, no less than a last-ditch wound. "Look, there are cherry peaches waiting in line. It's no longer possible. I have to get up and eat to survive." Shen Shuwei was so hungry that she opened the quilt and tried to get up, but the result was tragic. Her legs went weak and she fell down. Xiao Jinyan's quick eyesight and hands quickly stretched out his arms around her waist and pulled her back in time. "Slow down." Shen Shuwei said that she was already slow enough and her legs were weak, so she couldn't blame her. "Why did you fall suddenly? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere?" After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he instinctively ordered, "Lu 11, please send the doctor when." Lu 11, who was guarding the door, was about to leave after receiving the order. Shen Shuwei hurriedly shouted, "No, no, no, I'm fine." When Dr. Wen came to check, he was so embarrassed when he told him the reason. "Good night, babies." Acting coquettishly and cute, please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. This is Chapter 4, 8,000 words. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 282. Xiao Jinyan's eyes were full of worry. "Why did you suddenly fall down when nothing happened?" Shen Shuwei couldn't help rolling her eyes. "Why did I fall down, don't you know?" She tiptoed on her weak toes and whispered in Xiao Jinyan's ear, "Isn't it because you worked too hard last night?" She spoke very softly, for fear that Lu 11 at the door would hear it. Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused. "It's because I was too reckless." After saying that, he picked up Shen Shuwei and put her on the bed. "What's the use of just knowing? You have to restrain yourself. After washing up, Shen Shuwei and Xiao Jinyan had breakfast together. Shen Shuwei was really hungry, holding a crystal bun and eating one at a time. Seeing this, Xiao Jinyan reminded, "Eat slowly, be careful not to choke." As soon as the voice fell, Shen Shuwei really choked and her face flushed. Xiao Jinyan stood up and patted her back, "Can't you eat slower?" After Shen Shuwei recovered, she said aggrievedly, "Isn't this concubine hungry?" "Xiao Jinyan, there's no rush. I'll eat slower." Shen Shuwei took the crystal bun and bit half of it. Xiao Jinyan saw it and shook his head helplessly, and sat back down. "I already know who poisoned the chickens and ducks." Shen Shuwei just stuffed the remaining half of the crystal bun into her mouth, puffed up her cheeks and asked, "Who?" Xiao Jinyan answered concisely, "Concubine Shui, both times it was her." Shen Shuwei didn't understand, why did she poison the chickens and ducks? The chickens and ducks didn't provoke her. "She is targeting you." Xiao Jinyan frowned when he thought of Suiyan's inner thoughts. "Then why did she poison the chickens and ducks if she came for me? She lost 5 in vain. If she was poisoned, she wouldn't be afraid." Xiao Jinyan frowned, "What nonsense." Shen Shuwei shook his head, put his chopsticks into the drawer, picked up a crystal bag and put it in his mouth and took a bite. Xiao Jinyan said, "Chickens and ducks are still poultry, how can they be compared with yours?" Shen Shuwei nodded in agreement, "Your Highness is right." With the crystal bag in his mouth, he spoke vaguely. Xiao Jinyan stared at her for a while, then lowered his head to continue eating the breakfast in the bowl. Shen Shuwei raised his eyes and glanced at Xiao Jinyan, only to see him drinking porridge in small sips, eating elegantly and nobly, really pleasing to the eye. She asked curiously, "Your Highness, where did you get the snowball?" Xiao Jinyan paused after hearing this. He put down the spoon in his hand, picked up the silk handkerchief and wiped his mouth. "Why do you suddenly ask this?" Shen Shuwei said, "I am just curious, Sichuan is too smart and too powerful." Xiao Jinyan said faintly, "We were in trouble together, and I brought it back with me when I returned to the country." Shen Shuwei asked again, "How did you get into trouble?" Xiao Jinyan paused in wiping, and was silent for a long time. He said calmly, "I met with an accident on the way back from being a hostage in another country." Shen Shuwei nodded, "I know, Sichuan is also someone who shared the hardships with your Highness." Xiao Jinyan did not comment. Before leaving, Xiao Jinyan asked, "Do you have any poison?" Shen Shuwei looked puzzled, "What does your Highness want the poison for?" Xiao Jinyan snorted coldly, "Suiyan poisoned your chickens and ducks, and I will let her taste the taste of being poisoned, the kind that won't kill people." Yes. Shen Shuwei turned around and took out the medicine box, opened the lid, searched inside for a while, and found a small bottle and handed it to Xiao Jinyan. "Your Highness, this is a powder that can cause a rash on your face. It looks like an allergy symptom." Xiao Jinyan held the medicine bottle, and a doubt flashed in his eyes, "Allergy?" Shen Shuwei thought about it, and it seemed that there was no word for allergy in ancient times. She explained, "It means that the body is not used to this powder, which leads to the disease caused." "I know." Xiao Jinyan looked at the medicine in his hand and asked again, "How to use it?" Shen Shuwei told Xiao Jinyan how to use it. After listening, Xiao Jinyan took the medicine and left. After Xiao Jinyan left, Shen Shuwei went to sleep. Kameng Palace. Suiyan didn't sleep well last night. Even after taking a petal bath, she still felt the stink of chicken shit on her body. 2 incense burners were lit in the room before she could fall asleep. "I got up a little late today. When I had breakfast, I saw the porridge in the bowl and thought of my close contact with chicken shit last night. I immediately vomited out of nausea." Shuiyao asked worriedly, "Princess, are you okay?" Suiyan gritted her teeth, "It's all Shen Shuwei's fault." Shuiyao looked at the untouched breakfast table and asked, "Princess, how about I change some breakfast?" No need. Swayan ate some food and asked Shuiyao to remove the breakfast. Swayan asked someone to find out that Xiao Jinyan had lunch in the prince's bedroom today. Before lunchtime, Swayan dressed up and went to the prince's bedroom. Seeing Xiao Jinyan from a distance, she happily went to meet him. "Your Highness, you are back." Xiao Jinyan stopped when he heard the voice, and looked over, and saw Swayan walking towards him with a smile on her face and a cheerful step. "Is there anything for concubine Shui?" Swayan smiled happily. "I want to have lunch with your Highness." Xiao Jinyan nodded, "Yes." Seeing Xiao Jinyan nod, Swayan happily reached out to hold Xiao Jinyan's arm, but Xiao Jinyan avoided her without a word and walked straight in. Swayan's hand paused in the air. Looking at the slender figure walking straight in, she withdrew her hand with some disappointment, and followed. Lunch was prepared by the imperial kitchen. Xiao Jinyan usually did not drink, and after the food was served, he asked someone to serve the rice. Seeing that there was no wine on the table, Swayan asked Xiao Jinyan curiously, "Your Highness, don't you drink?" Xiao Jinyan's voice was cold and distant. "I occasionally drink a couple of glasses, but I don't drink normally." Xiao Jinyan has always been aloof, and Swayan knows that, so she hopes that through her change, Xiao Jinyan can become gentler. "My father loves to drink, and my mother will control him, and he often drinks secretly." Swayan happily shared her own joy. Xiao Jinyan replied lightly, "Don't talk when sleeping or eating." Swayan was in high spirits, and Xiao Jinyan's words were no less than a basin of cold water poured down on her head, extinguishing her mood to talk. "I know." Swayan picked up the chopsticks and put some dishes into the bowl, eating in small bites. A lunch ended in a quiet and awkward atmosphere. Swayan wiped the corners of her mouth elegantly with the handkerchief, and looked at Xiao Jinyan with her eyes. "Your Highness, are you going to be busy later?" Xiao Jinyan nodded, "Yes." Swayan pinched the handkerchief in her hand and continued to ask, "Then your Highness, would you like to come to my palace for dinner today? I have someone prepare a sumptuous dinner." Xiao Jinyan still nodded, "Yes, I will go after I finish my work." Swayan curved her eyes happily, "Then I will wait for your Highness in the Kameng Palace." When Xiao Jinyan stood up, Swayan also stood up and walked a few steps to him. Xiao Jinyan moved his position quietly, and the two of them almost brushed shoulders. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 283. At this time, it was the first time that the two of them were so close. Shui Yan followed Xiao Jinyan with her eyes straight, holding a handkerchief in her little hand. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and glanced at Shui Yan before walking out of the dormitory. A gust of wind blew in front of him, and Xiao Jinyan flicked his sleeves. Shui Yan smelled the fragrance of flowers and narrowed her eyes happily. Xiao Jinyan stood on the wind outlet, glanced at Shui Yan who was following closely behind him, and said calmly, "Concubine Shui, please go back, I have to go to the imperial study." Shui Yan nodded happily, "I am waiting for your Highness to have dinner at Kameng Palace." Xiao Jinyan withdrew his gaze and strode towards the imperial study room. Shui Yan looked at Xiao Jinyan's leaving figure and was secretly happy that she would definitely be able to sleep with him tonight. After returning, Shui Yan told Shuiyao to prepare rich food and wine in the evening, as well as a pot of good wine, and enjoy themselves. "Princess, don't worry, I will definitely take care of it." Shuiyao also knew that the princess would sleep with her tonight, and she felt happy in her heart. "Instruct the people below to prepare early." Swayan also bathed and changed clothes in advance, and fresh petals were indispensable. The skincare essential oils are also missing. Before it gets dark, a sumptuous dinner is ready, as well as good wine. Shui Yan had already bathed and changed clothes, and was sitting in the room happily looking forward to Xiao Jinyan's arrival. While waiting, she scratched her face countless times, always feeling itchy. She didn't dare to scratch hard for fear of breaking it. Shui Yao happily walked in from the outside, looked at Shui Yan, and was startled. "Princess, what's wrong with your face?" Shui Yan frowned and said, "My face is a little itchy." "Princess, please stop scratching. I will bring you a mirror." Shui Yao turned around to get the mirror and handed it to Shui Yan, asking her to look in the mirror. Shui Yan looked at herself in the mirror in confusion, and when she saw her face was red and dotted with red, she immediately screamed in fright. "Ah!" Shui Yan pushed the bronze mirror away, not daring to look at that face again. She trembled and said, "How could this happen? My face would never be like this. What a woman cares about most is her face, not to mention being a beautiful princess." "Princess, don't be afraid. I'll call the doctor here." Shui Yao turned around and ran out. After a while, Dr. Wen was called. "Imperial Doctor, please show my princess a quick look." Shui Yao was so anxious that she almost cried. Dr. Wen took a few steps forward and saw Shui Yan covering her face with a handkerchief. He said warmly, "Concubine Shui, do you want me to see your face?" Shui Yan hesitated for a while before showing her face to Dr. Wen. "Dr. Wen, what's wrong with my face? Will it be disfigured?" Dr. Wen arrived and said, "Let me see it first before you know." Shui Yao wiped her tears and said, "Physician, you have to take a closer look. Face is very important to my princess." "I know." Dr. Wen put down the medical kit and examined Shui Yan according to the procedure. Shui Yan was so anxious that her two beautiful eyes turned into walnuts from tears. After some diagnosis, Dr. Wen said slowly, "This is a very rare moss. You can't see the sun, the wind, or eat smelly food. You can rest in the house for a few days, and it will be cured with some medicine. Will there be scars? This is what Shui Yan is most worried about." Dr. Wen, you said, "You need to pay attention to it every day, otherwise you will leave scars." After Dr. Wen left the ointment and left, Shui Yan remembered that Xiao Jinyan was coming for dinner tonight, and she couldn't let Xiao Jinyan see her like this. She hurriedly ordered, "Shui Yao, please tell His Highness that I am not feeling well tonight and cannot receive His Highness." "Slave, go now." Shui Yao took the order and trotted out. When Xiao Jinyan came out of the dormitory, he saw Shui Yao running over from a distance and blessing her body. "Your Highness, may you be blessed with peace and prosperity." Xiao Jinyan asked knowingly, "How can you behave in such a panic?" "Your Highness, my young master is feeling unwell. I'm afraid I won't be able to see your Highness tonight." Shui Yao lowered his eyebrows and nodded. Xiao Jinyan guessed that the medicinal powder was working, and he asked in a deep voice, "Why are you feeling uncomfortable? Have you called the Imperial Doctor?" "I've already asked the Imperial Doctor. The Imperial Doctor said it's nothing serious. Just have a good rest," Shui Yao said with a guilty conscience. Xiao Jinyan didn't even bother to deal with it, and said, "In that case, you go back and serve your little master." "I know this." Shui Yao felt blessed and retreated. When Shui Yan saw Shui Yao coming back, she hurriedly asked, "What did your Highness say?" "His Royal Highness is still quite worried about the princess, and asked if he had invited an Imperial Doctor." Shui Yao said what she just said again. Shui Yan felt a little better, and she asked again, "Did His Highness ever say that he wanted to come and visit me?" Shui Yao shook her head, "No, His Highness asked the slave to take good care of the princess." Shui Yan was a little disappointed, fearing that Xiao Jinyan would be disgusted when he saw her face. Now that Xiao Jinyan was not here, she was disappointed again as to whether Xiao Jinyan really cared about her. Not long after Shui Yao left, Dr. Wen came. Xiao Jinyan asked in a low voice, "How is it?" "Back to your Highness, concubine Shui has a lot of red spots on her face and her cheeks are very red. She won't get better for a while. Wei Chen has told concubine Shui to keep her mouth shut and not to be exposed to the wind and sun these days." Dr. Wen slowly said, "Open your mouth." Xiao Jinyan nodded with satisfaction. In the afternoon, Xiao Jinyan informed Imperial Physician Wen in advance, so when Shui Yao asked for Imperial Physician, it happened to be Imperial Physician Wen. Only then did the next scene happen. Concubine Shui can rest for a while. Xiao Jinyan withdrew his gaze and turned into the Hehuan Hall. After entering the Hehuan Palace, Xiao Jinyan briefly told Shen Shuwei what had just happened. Shen Shuwei had 2 servings of crystal pork elbows for lunch today, and she was in a good mood all day. At this time, she heard that Suiyan's face had allergic symptoms, and she said, "This is revenge." Xiao Jinyan did not comment. In the evening, there was stewed vermicelli, one of Shen Shuwei's favorites. Not only that, there was also fried pork belly with taro powder, which was also one of Shen Shuwei's favorites. Xiao Jinyan looked at the steaming dishes, and there was one that he had never seen before. He pointed to the dish he had never seen and asked, "What is this dish?" Shen Shuwei looked at the bowl of freshly cooked dishes, and her saliva almost flowed out just by looking at it. Stir-fried pork belly with taro powder is especially delicious. "I'll try it." Xiao Jinyan took a piece of it with curiosity and put it in his bowl to cool. Taro powder is the powder washed from the taro planted last year. Although the amount is not much, it can be eaten for a long time. Xiao Jinyan tasted a bite of the fried pork belly with sweet potato, and he praised generously, "This dish tastes good." Of course, how can the dishes that I like not be delicious? Shen Shuwei couldn't wait to pick up the chopsticks and put some into her bowl, and ate happily. Without being disturbed by outsiders, she had a happy meal. She naturally stayed in Hehuan Palace at night. After taking a bath, Xiao Jinyan came to the bedside and looked at Shen Shuwei lying on the bed. She was still wearing suspenders and shorts, with slender arms and white thighs, all visible. "Don't you feel uncomfortable lying like this?" A meaningful look. "Good night, my dears. 2 chapters have been updated. I am acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets to support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 284. A meaningful look. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, and then followed his gaze down. She was wearing a sling, and her prone position caused the neckline to be wide open, revealing a hint of spring. Because it was hot, she asked Chengzi to make her a sling pajamas, which was made of silk and was very cool to wear. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, who had already sat down on the bed. "I'm not uncomfortable." Xiao Jinyan looked her up and down. It was hot these few days, so she started to wear it like this, and only wore it when she was resting. His eyes fell on the open neckline, and his eyes darkened. He moved his eyes from her chest to the book in her hand. "What are you doing?" "I'm studying." Shen Shuwei supported herself on the bed and sat up, sitting cross-legged. Xiao Jinyan was relieved that Xiaju finally got the idea. "It's rare that you are so motivated." "What are you learning?" "Recipes. I found that I have eaten many foods many times. I am studying some new dishes to try." Shen Shuwei proudly handed the recipe to Xiao Jinyan and turned to the page she was studying to show Xiao Jinyan. "Xiao Jinyan." It turned out that what Xiaju was talking about was learning how to make delicious food. He looked at the page in front of him, which had colorful dishes on it. His slender fingers touched the paper surface, which was smooth to the touch, and found that it was different from the paper here. He turned his head to look at Shen Shuwei. "Where did this recipe come from?" Shen Shuwei paused. How could she forget that this was a modern recipe and the paper quality was completely different from the paper here? Xiao Jinyan always notices these details. "I said I picked it up, Your Highness, do you believe it?" Xiao Jinyan looked at her with a smile. "What do you think?" Shen Shuwei blinked her bright eyes twice. Under Xiao Jinyan's gaze, she held his shoulder with one hand and wanted to put the book back on the bedside table. But she was small and short, so she had to sit on Xiao Jinyan's thighs, so that she could put the book on the bedside table. After putting the book, she looked at Xiao Jinyan again and took the initiative to kiss the corner of his lips. This is a good night kiss. The implication is that it's getting late and it's time to rest. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the person in front of him. There was a dark color in his dark eyes. Shen Shuwei didn't expect it was easy to come up, but she couldn't go down. She found a problem. In winter, Xiao Jinyan's body was like a stove and wanted people to get close to him. The body will be very hot in summer, making people want to stay away from him. Yuxiang Palace. This is the second time that concubine Su has met the man in black. She has been terrified for 3 days and 3 days, and she is most afraid of the time agreed by the man in black. Whether she finds the person named Xiaju or not, she is afraid that the man in black will kill her to silence her. In the past, they often said that she was arrogant and domineering, and that mouth was unreasonable. Now she wonders if it is because of this that she is so unlucky to meet the man in black. The night wind blew, and a slender figure appeared in the house. Concubine Su could see clearly that the man in black came in from the window, just like last time, and came quietly. The man in black came to the round table and sat down, crossing his legs, just like he was at home, with a leisurely posture. "What's the matter?" Concubine Su clenched the small handkerchief in her hand, very nervous. She shook her head. "I haven't found it yet." The man in black stared at Concubine Su for a long time after hearing this. She was wearing a purple dress, which made her skin very white. With her hair tied up in a gentle manner, her hair accessories are luxurious and elegant. You can tell at a glance that she is a rich girl who has been spoiled since childhood and has never suffered. Xiaju will be more delicate and lovely than her. Concubine Su found that the beautiful almond eyes of the man in black were staring at her. She protected herself with her hands and looked at the man in black vigilantly. "I tell you, I am the prince's woman. If you dare to hit on me, don't blame me for not reminding you, you will be exterminated." The man in black looked at her with a fierce look in his eyes, but he was not scared. He said lightly, "Are you the prince's woman?" "Of course, I am the prince's concubine." Concubine Su snorted, scared. The man in black nodded thoughtfully. He played with the teacup in front of him, glanced at the bedroom, and said faintly, "How long has it been since the prince came to stay here?" Concubine Su felt that the man in black was deliberately mocking her. She raised her chin and said, "His Highness came yesterday, but you just didn't meet him." The man in black laughed softly when he heard this. "You are very vain." Concubine Su was angry and said, "What do you mean by this?" The man in black answered concisely, "I have been in the palace recently." Concubine Su shuddered when she heard this, and even her voice trembled. "You are not always near my palace, are you?" The man in black did not deny it. "Almost always at night." Concubine Su. "Oh my God! Is this man a pervert?" Then she thought that her lie was exposed, and she wanted to crawl into a hole in the ground in embarrassment. "What's wrong with His Highness not coming? Can't I joke?" The man in black smiled. "I was joking too." Concubine Su. Concubine Su's face turned red with anger, but she couldn't help but feel that the other party was powerful and poisoned her, so she didn't dare to confront him as usual. It was too aggrieved. Fighting with a bunch of women for one man, as the saying goes, there are too many wolves and too little meat. It's normal to stay alone in an empty room. The man in black paused here. "I will never let Xiaoju Su and so many women fight for one person." Concubine Su heard the second half of the sentence. Who doesn't want to enjoy the love of one person alone? But, which man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines now? A man as clean and self-possessed as Xiao Jinyan is really rare. She looked at the man in black with curiosity. "Xiaoju is really your sweetheart?" The man in black looked at Concubine Su with an unhurried look in his eyes. Concubine Su swallowed her saliva in shock. "I'm just asking, it's already a rare species for a man to marry only one woman." Rare species is a word she learned a few days ago, and she has already learned and used it. Man in black, rare species. Concubine Sue hurriedly explained, "Don't get me wrong, this is to praise you. It shows that you are dedicated and doting on your wife, which is rare in the world." The man in black understood now, and his eyes showed a fierce look. No matter who wants to marry Xiaju, if he can't marry only Xiaju, he is not qualified to marry Xiaju. Concubine Sue looked envious. "You are so kind to Xiaju." The man in black was non-committal. After the man in black left, he left the antidote for her. Concubine Sue took the antidote, glanced at the empty bedroom, and sighed secretly. Why didn't she notice that this place was empty before? Concubine Sue waved her handkerchief, undressed and took off her belt, and went to bed. But when she thought about the man in black saying that he was almost always near Yuxiang Hall these days, she was so scared that she couldn't sleep. The next day, Concubine Sue went to Hehuan Hall with two national treasures in her eyes. On the way, Caixia said, "Little master, Concubine Shui suddenly fell ill yesterday. I heard she had a rash on her face. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 285. Concubine Sue was shaking her handkerchief and walking listlessly. She suddenly became energetic after hearing this. Is she disfigured? Caixia shook her head. I heard from the imperial physician that she needs to avoid certain foods and take some time to recover. She got it right. Concubine Sue was a little disappointed, but she felt a little relieved when she thought about how scared she must be because of the rash on her face. Caixia said again, Concubine Shui wanted His Highness to have dinner with her yesterday, but she didn't dare to see His Highness because of the rash on her face. Why did His Highness agree to have dinner with her? Can't you see that she has ulterior motives? Concubine Sue was indignant. Caixia was a little confused. My lady doesn't like His Highness anymore. Where is His Highness going? Why is my lady Wei still angry? Concubine Sue raised her chin. You don't understand. I'm just defending the weak. Caixia nodded, not quite understanding. My lady, calm down. His Highness didn't go. Concubine Sue supported the golden hairpin. That's better. Shen Shuwei had just finished breakfast and was lying on the bed to recuperate. When Concubine Sue came in, she saw Shen Shuwei lying on the bed like a salted fish. When Shen Shuwei saw Concubine Sue coming, they were so familiar with each other that they didn't need to greet each other. When she saw Concubine Sue's two big dark circles under her eyes, she was stunned. Concubine Sue, what did you do last night? Concubine Sue opened her mouth and wanted to vent, but when she thought of the threat of the man in black, she swallowed it back. For someone like her who had to say whatever she had, it was torture to hold it in. I didn't sleep well last night. Concubine Sue was vague. Seeing Shen Shuwei lying on the bed, she asked worriedly, why are you still lying on the bed? Are you sick? Shen Shuwei laughed, I have nothing to do, so I plan to take a nap. Why are you sleeping in broad daylight? Concubine Sue yawned after saying that. Thinking of Concubine Shui, she became interested again. Shen Liangdi, Concubine Shui has a rash on her face. It makes me laugh to death. This is the end of shamelessness. Shen Shuwei was lying on the bed drowsy. Concubine Sue looked down and saw that Shen Shuwei's eyes were almost closed. She yawned, you didn't sleep well last night either. Shen Shuwei nodded, I went to bed in the second half of the night. Can I sleep well? Concubine Sue sympathized with the same pain, I also went to bed in the second half of the night. She was scared when she thought of the night 2 days later, which was the agreed time. When will this terrifying day end? Kameng Palace. After finishing breakfast, Suiyan sat in front of the bronze mirror and gently applied the ointment prepared by the imperial physician when on her cheeks, hoping that the red spots and red areas would fade quickly. Thinking that Xiao Jinyan was going to stay overnight last night, It was just right for him to sleep with her, but he was delayed because of his face. She still felt very sorry. Shuiyao, did His Highness review the memorials again last night? Shuiyao said, Princess, His Highness finished reviewing the memorials very early last night. Suiyan looked at herself in the mirror. At first, she couldn't accept this face. After looking at it a few more times, she reluctantly accepted herself now. The imperial physician also said that it would be fine. Then didn't he rest very early last night? Did he rest in his own bedroom? Shuiyao said hesitantly, His Highness rested in the Hehuan Palace last night. Suiyan paused when she heard the words, and she turned her head to look at Shuiyao. What did you say? Where did His Highness stay overnight? Shuiyao repeated in a low voice, Hehuan Palace, Shenliangdi's place. Your Highness went to the Hehuan Palace. Shuiyan waved her hands in anger, sweeping all the rouge and powder on the table to the ground. Shuiyao was startled and hurriedly comforted her, Princess, don't be angry. If the princess hadn't been sick yesterday and couldn't receive the prince, how could Shenliangdi have been in bed with you? Shuiyan was trembling with anger. Looking at the face in the bronze mirror, she was even more angry. If it weren't for this face, she would have been in bed with you last night, and maybe she would have had a boy. As a result, Shenliangdi got the advantage. I am the princess of Suiya Kingdom. Why does Shenliangdi compete with me? Princess, calm down. Although Shenliangdi got the advantage this time, we still have a chance. When the princess's face is better, are you afraid that you won't have the opportunity to sleep with her? Shuiyao advised gently. The more Shuiyan thought about what happened yesterday, the more unwilling she was. It's too easy for her. It must be Shenliangdi who learned that the princess was ill, so she openly seduced the prince to go to the Hehuan Palace, Shuiyao said as she cleaned up the rouge and powder on the ground. She is just a concubine, who only knows how to seduce His Highness. Shuiyan looked at her face and said impatiently, call Imperial Doctor. When will this face be healed? I will go right away. Shuiyao packed up her things and trotted out. After Imperial Doctor Wen came, he took the pulse again, and the result was exactly the same as yesterday. Shuiyan touched her face, feeling extremely anxious. When will it be healed? Concubine Shui, take good care of yourself, don't expose yourself to the light or the wind, and you will be fine in a few days. When Imperial Physician repeated. Suiyan could only worry when she heard this. Asterisk. The sun shone through the branches onto the bluestone road, and the air was filled with heat. Shen Shuwei was too lazy to go out, so she sat on the couch and looked out the window. She saw Yuangun squatting there eating carrots. After these days of training by Sichuan, the fat belly was gone and his figure became slim. Sichuan suddenly jumped down from the top of the wall, and Yuangun ran away in fear. Without the fat belly, he ran very fast, like an arrow from a string. Sichuan stopped and glanced at the overly frightened Yuangun. His eyes seemed to say, coward. At this time, Chengzi came in trotting, my lady, Nanny Qingying is here. As soon as she finished speaking, Qingying came in, Shenliangdi, the queen wants to see you. Shen Shuwei got off the couch and followed Qingying to Fenji Palace. Chengzi held up an oil paper umbrella to shield Shen Shuwei from the scorching sun. When she walked into Fenji Palace, she saw the queen lazily lying on the imperial concubine couch, and the little palace maid was fanning gently with a round fan to cool her down. Shen Shuwei stepped forward to I greet the queen, and wish the queen a long life. The queen said lightly, get up. Thank you, Queen. Shen Shuwei stood up and looked up at the queen. What is the matter with the queen? The prince has no children so far. Yesterday, I mentioned this to the emperor. The prince is the future crown prince, and offspring is particularly important. The queen paused here and looked at Shen Shuwei's belly. There was still no movement after so long. The guanyin of the White Horse Temple is not effective? In the East Palace, the prince likes you the most, but there has been no movement after a year. I asked you to come here today and want the imperial physician to check your pulse and see what the reason is. It's time to regulate it as soon as possible. Shen Shuwei lowered her eyes when she heard it. She didn't expect that the queen called her for the child. She and Xiao Jinyan had been together for a short time, how could she get pregnant so quickly? It's a pity that only God knows about this matter, Shen Shuwei knows, and Xiao Jinyan knows. Good evening, my dears. I am begging for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets by being queued. 8,000 words. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 286. The queen ordered, please sit down. The eunuch brought a chair and placed it next to Shen Shuwei, then bowed and left. Shen Shuwei sat down as she was told. The queen ordered again, Dr. Wang, check Shen Liangdi's pulse. Shen Shuwei raised her eyes and saw Dr. Wang coming out from the side. It turned out that she had been prepared. The queen was really eager to have a grandchild. She took the initiative to stretch out her wrist and pulled up her sleeve. Dr. Wang took out a square towel and placed it on Shen Shuwei's wrist, then put 2 fingers on the pulse and began to check the pulse. The queen held the teacup and drank slowly. She glanced at Shen Shuwei. She looked well behaved, beautiful, and pleasing. The key was that she could cook delicious food. No wonder the prince liked her. She, a woman, like this. It's been a year and she hasn't gotten pregnant yet. There must be something wrong with her body, right? It would be a pity if she couldn't have a child. Otherwise, she would definitely be very popular if she had a daughter. The queen sighed and continued to drink tea. Wang Yuyi took back his hand and the handkerchief at the same time. Shen Shuwei took back her hand and put down her sleeves. The queen looked up at Wang Yuyi, how is it? Wang Yuyi nodded and said, replying to the queen, Shen Liangdi has a cold body and weak qi, so it is not easy for her to get pregnant. The queen paused in drinking tea and looked at Shen Shuwei with her beautiful eyes. Wang Yuyi, are you sure Shen Liangdi is not easy to get pregnant? Replying to the queen, Shen Liangdi is weak, and her qi and blood are weak. It is too difficult for her to get pregnant, Wang Yuyi said. The queen put down the teacup after hearing this and looked at Shen Shuwei. No wonder she hadn't gotten pregnant for a long time. It turned out that she was weak and not easy to get pregnant. The queen retracted her gaze and ordered, then you prescribe some prescriptions for Shen Liangdi to regulate her and see if it can be remedied. Queen, Shen Liangdi is too weak and needs a long time to regulate. I dare not guarantee whether she can get pregnant, Wang Yuyi said. Let's prescribe some prescriptions for conditioning first. The queen looked at Shen Shuwei again, feeling a little sorry for such good genes. I obey your order, Imperial Physician. Wang took the order and prescribed a prescription. Shen Shuwei glanced at Imperial Physician Wang in confusion. It was true that she was cold and weak, and it was all because of the accumulated problems of the original owner. But she had been taking medicine for more than half a year, and she had gotten much better, and it would not affect pregnancy. Why did Imperial Physician Wang exaggerate? Or was it that ancient medicine was not well developed, and believed that such weak and cold body would affect women's pregnancy? After all, the treatment of diseases in ancient and modern times was completely different. After Imperial Physician Wang wrote the prescription, he left with the medicine box. The queen comforted, you are still young, don't worry about it, and take care of yourself first. Eunuch Ren came in to report, Queen, the prince is here. Shen Shuwei turned her head to look at the door of the palace, and saw Xiao Jinyan striding in a black court dress. He had a slender figure, and the black court dress made him look calm and noble. She was stunned for a moment, then stood up and bowed, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Shen Shuwei and stepped forward to greet, Your son pays respects to the Queen Mother. The Queen raised her eyes to Xiao Jinyan in the center of the palace. Seeing that he was wearing court clothes, he should have come from the imperial study. Why is the prince here? Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded. Your son passed by Fenji Palace and thought of paying respects to the Queen Mother. The Queen nodded. It's hard for you to be so filial. You came at the right time. I just have something to discuss with you. Xiao Jinyan, please speak, Queen Mother. Your son is all ears. The Queen looked at Shen Shuwei. Shen Liangdi, please leave first. Shen Shuwei glanced at Xiao Jinyan and bowed. Your concubine will take her leave. After that, she slowly withdrew. After the Queen saw Shen Shuwei leave, she slowly spoke. Shen Liangdi has not been pregnant for a long time, so I asked the imperial physician to check her pulse and found that she is weak and it is not easy for her to get pregnant. Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused when he heard this. He didn't expect to hear this sentence. In the palace, if a woman can't get pregnant, what does that mean? He knows better than anyone else. He said, Mother, Shen Liangdi is still young. Even if she is weak, she can be adjusted. There is no rush. When the Queen heard this, she knew that Xiao Jinyan was defending Shen Shuwei, which also showed that Xiao Jinyan really liked Shen Shuwei. She always thought that Xiao Jinyan would not care about anyone for the position of the crown prince, and would not let anyone become a stumbling block. Prince, you are the future crown prince, but you have no children now. Do you know what this means? Xiao Jinyan said, Mother, I am only 20 years old and I am not in a hurry to have children. The Queen's eyes darkened. Prince, your father had 4 children at your age. You should know the importance of children for the future crown prince. Xiao Jinyan pursed his lips. Of course, he knew the importance of children, which would affect the position of the crown prince and would also be the reason for others to impeach him. Mother, please give me some time. The Queen said coldly, Prince, you have been married for a year, and you don't even have a child in a year. Aren't you afraid that the ministers in the court will doubt you? Mother. Before Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he was interrupted by the Queen. Not only do I think you should treat everyone equally, but the Emperor also thinks so. You only favor Shen Liangdi, but you should also consider your children. What is more important, you should consider it yourself. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, I understand. The Queen waved her hand, go away. I'll take my leave. Xiao Jinyan slowly withdrew. After Xiao Jinyan left, the Queen ordered, call Prince Yu over. Yes. Eunuch Ren turned and went out. Shen Shuwei stood on the porch, admiring the peonies in the yard and waiting for Xiao Jinyan. After waiting for a long time, she saw Xiao Jinyan coming out of the hall, and she happily greeted him. Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan stopped and watched Shen Shuwei trotting towards him. He didn't know if she knew that it was difficult for her to get pregnant. Wouldn't it be sad to know? When the people came closer, he said, let's go back first. Shen Shu nodded slightly, okay. Asterisk. Xiao Jinyu followed Eunuch Ren to Fenji Palace. When he saw the Queen, he enthusiastically stepped forward to greet her, my son, please give my regards to the Queen. The Queen waved to her son, come here quickly and let me see if you have gained weight or lost weight these days. Xiao Jinyu took a few steps forward after hearing this, sat down next to the Queen, rolled up his sleeves, exposed his arms to the Queen, and said proudly, Mother, take a good look, I have developed muscles from my recent practice. Really? Let me take a look. The Queen stared at her son's arms and found that there were indeed muscles. There are indeed muscles. It's good to practice martial arts and keep fit. Xiao Jinyu was quite proud. It is not enough to strengthen the body. My son and I must be as good at both civil and military skills as the prince brother. The Queen said, what are you doing when you are so tired? You will be protected by guards when you go out, and you can just practice kung fu and keep fit. My son, listen to your mother. Xiao Jinyu agreed on the surface, but in his heart he still made up his mind to practice hard. The queen did not forget about the business. Yesterday your father mentioned that you should have a concubine. You are 17 this year, so it's time for you to have a concubine. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 287. When Xiao Jinyu heard about the concubine, he immediately frowned. He held the queen's arm and said, "Queen mother, why are you proposing to have a concubine again?" When the queen saw her son acting coquettishly, she smiled and said, "You child, the first boy will be married off, and the first girl will be married off. You choose the one you like as the concubine first, and then you will choose the main concubine." "But I don't want to have a concubine yet." Xiao Jinyu was a little embarrassed. "It's great to be single, no one cares about him. No, there is someone in the family to care about him now." The queen looked curious. "Don't you have a girl you like?" Xiao Jinyu paused after hearing this, then shook his head. "I don't have a girl I like yet." The queen still knows her son somewhat. If there is a girl she really likes, she will definitely ask her to marry her. "Then let's take a concubine and 2 concubines first." Xiao Jinyu quit immediately after hearing this. "My mother, the prince, and my brother are all women who were only 19 years old. My son is still young. How about waiting for another 2 years?" The queen stared at her son for a long time, and said helplessly, "Then wait a little longer. We will discuss it with your father and I." Xiao Jinyu raised his eyebrows happily. "Thank you, Queen Mother. I will know that the queen is the best to me." I secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and I was able to cope with it. Returning to Jiancheng Hall, Xiao Jinyu saw Miss Han holding a kettle to water the flowers in the yard. It has been almost half a year since Miss Han entered the palace. She is a little cold, and that coldness is completely different from that of the prince's brother. She is also very gentle and proficient in all kinds of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. He is also very good at serving others. When Xiao Jinyu thought about what happened in the past 2 days, he was a little embarrassed, and his fair and handsome face turned red. Han Yan stood up straight, looked sideways at Xiao Jinyu in the corridor, and walked over. "King Yu, what are you doing standing there?" Xiao Jinyu had an embarrassed look on his face. Thinking that he had just recalled what happened last night, his eyes dodged. "I just came back from Fenji Palace and saw you watering the flowers." Han Yan looked at his handsome and red face and asked, "Why is Prince Yu blushing?" "It's too hot outside." "Too hot?" Xiao Jinyu turned his head and blushed even more when he saw the flowers in the garden. "Yeah. Certainly." Han Yan chuckled. "I prepared scented tea for King Yu, do you want to drink it?" "Okay," Xiao Jinyu said and strode in. Han Yan put down the kettle and followed. Hehuan Hall. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyu sitting on the couch. He was sitting there drinking tea after returning from Fenji Palace. She took a sip of tea and put the teacup back on the low table. "Your Highness, what's wrong with you?" Xiao Jinyu stopped drinking tea, then raised his eyes to look at Shen Shuwei. "I'm fine." "Oh," Shen Chu said softly, "just now in Fenji Palace, Dr. Wang checked my concubine's pulse." Xiao Jinyu's heart tightened. He didn't know if his mother had told Shen Shuwei. Thinking of what happened just now, she probably already knew about it. "You knew already?" Shen Shuwei was not stupid and quickly guessed the meaning of Xiao Jin's words. "Your Highness, are you referring to the Dr. Wang saying that it is not easy for my concubine to get pregnant?" Xiao Jinyu nodded. "Well, you don't need to worry about this, just take your time to adjust your body." Shen Shuwei's eyebrows widened when he heard the words. "I checked my pulse and found that I am indeed cold and weak. This is why my stomach hurts every time I have my menstruation." Xiao Jinyu also saw that she had stomach aches during menstruation and her face turned a little pale. He regretted that he knew it was too late. Otherwise, he could have taken care of it earlier and it shouldn't be that difficult to get pregnant. I will ask Dr. Wen to diagnose your pulse and prescribe some prescriptions to take care of your body. After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he ordered, Lu 11, please ask Dr. Wen to come over. Lu 11, who was guarding the door, responded and went to Tai Hospital. Shen Shuwei didn't stop him either. She also wanted to hear the doctor's opinion. Dr. Wen came quickly and saluted after entering, Your Highness, Shen Liangdi. Xiao Jinyan ordered, diagnose Shen Liangdi's pulse. Dr. Wang said that she is cold and weak, and it is not easy to get pregnant. You can prepare some prescriptions to treat her. Doubt flashed in Dr. Wen's eyes. He felt that Shen Shuwei's medical skills were superior to his, so how could he be used to diagnose the pulse? It's just that he obeyed His Highness's orders. Shen Shuwei took the initiative to stretch out his wrist. Dr. Wen put the square scarf on Shen Shuwei's wrist and began to concentrate on diagnosing the pulse. Xiao Jinyan stared at Shen Shuwei for a long time. When he came out of Fenji Palace, he didn't even think about how to deal with the heir's matter. If it is difficult for Xiaju to get pregnant, does he really want to have sex with another woman for the sake of having children? He couldn't accept such a thing from his heart. Although heirs are not the most important thing to the prince, they are still important. He looked at Shen Shuwei's childish face and still remembered her inner thoughts and never forgot them. After Dr. Wen Yu checked his pulse, he took back his hand and the square scarf at the same time. Xiao Jinyan asked, Is it easy to take care of? Shen Chu slightly raised his eyes to look at Dr. Wen, waiting for his answer. Dr. Wen lowered his eyebrows and nodded, Back to your highness, Shen Liangdi is indeed cold and weak, but it is not as difficult to get pregnant as Dr. Wang said, but... Xiao Jinyan asked, just what? Although it's not as exaggerated as Dr. Wang said, I don't dare to say it full. Dr. Wen has seen too many women who are not pregnant. Some of them have no serious health problems, but they just can't get pregnant, so nothing can be said too much. Full. Xiao Jinyan frowned, how do you say this? Dr. Wen gave an example, Weikan checked Chen Jiu's pulse a few days ago. There is nothing serious about her health, but she can't get pregnant. Xiao Jinyan turned his head to look at Shen Shuwei and found that she was listening attentively. If she really couldn't get pregnant, she might have a harder time in the future. After listening to what Imperial Dr. Wen said, Shen Shuwei nodded in agreement. What Imperial Dr. Wen said makes some sense. Imperial Dr. Wen secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he heard it. Fortunately, Shen Shuwei said so herself. Your Highness shouldn't be angry. Xiao Jinyan found the key point. His eyes were cold. Why did Imperial Dr. Wang exaggerate? Imperial Dr. Wen replied, it may be a misdiagnosis, or it may be intentional. Xiao Jinyan felt that there was something wrong with Imperial Dr. Wang. Could it be that the Queen Mother deliberately asked Imperial Dr. Wang to say so, in order to make him treat everyone equally? Apart from this possibility, he couldn't think of any other possibility. Seeing Xiao Jinyan so anxious, Shen Shuwei said in a gentle voice, Your Highness, there is nothing wrong with my body. She also felt that Imperial Dr. Wang was exaggerating. Xiao Jinyan comforted him, I know, don't worry. It's just that now the Queen Mother thinks that it's not easy for Xiaju to get pregnant, and she can't wait for him to have a child as soon as possible. Unless Xiaju gets pregnant now, otherwise the pressure from the Emperor and the Queen Mother may cause something to happen. It took him 5 years to get the position of the Crown Prince from nothing, and he won't give it up. After the Imperial Dr. Wen left, the room was so quiet that it seemed that they could hear each other's heartbeats. Shen Shuwei saw Xiao Jinyan frowning, and she reached out and tugged at his sleeve. Your Highness, did the Queen say something? Good night, my dear children. 2 chapters have been updated, 4,000 words. It's Monday, a new beginning. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 288. Just now in Fenji Palace, the queen asked her to leave. I wonder if there is something confidential that she cannot listen to. Xiao Jinyan raised his eyes to look at Shen Shuwei. The pair of bright star eyes were staring at him without blinking. He opened his mouth but did not say a word. This matter was originally his own business. Speaking it out would only put pressure on Xiaju. Shen Shuwei saw Xiao Jinyan's hesitation and knew that it was a state secret and could not be said. It doesn't matter if your highness doesn't say it. I don't have to hear it. Xiao Jinyan stared at Shen Shuwei for a while, and his eyes moved down to her belly. She was wearing a light green dress, and the waist was flat and visible. The most effective way is to make Xiaju pregnant in a short time to stop the gossip. Shen Shuwei was stared at by those sparkling phoenix eyes. She felt a little pressured for some reason. They met every day. Is it necessary to stare at each other so fiercely? Your Highness, do you still want tea? No. Xiao Jinyan put the teacup back on the low table and saw the lotus on the low table, still in full bloom. In the past half-month, the petals of the lotus are still gorgeous, with no signs of withering. He raised his eyes to look at Shen Shuwei. The lotus is well taken care of. Shen Shuwei looked at the lotus with great pride, and it would be fine to keep it for a few more months. Xiao Jinyan said calmly, no matter how long and how well you take care of it, it will eventually wither. Shen Shuwei lay on the low table, her slender fingers gently stirring water on the petals. I have a way to keep the lotus in full bloom forever. Xiao Jinyan's eyes flashed with surprise. Really? What's Xiaju's way? Shen Shuwei said again, but I won't use this method to keep the lotus forever. Xiao Jinyan, why? This is the law of nature, people are powerless to stop it. The lotus can bloom for so long, it's already a happy thing. Shen Shuwei paused here. Flowers and fruits, flowers wither before they can bear fruit. Xiao Jinyan was stunned at first, then relieved. I understand, I didn't expect Xiaju to have such a high level of comprehension. Shen Shuwei stared at the water lily and laughed twice. Only when it bears fruit can you eat lotus seeds. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei with relief. She stared at the water lily with curved eyebrows, thinking of the way she picked lotus pods last year. Suddenly, I began to doubt whether her realization was for the so-called natural law or for the lotus seed. The news that Shen Shuwei was not easy to get pregnant gradually spread in the Eastern Palace. Everyone in the Eastern Palace knew that Shen Liangdi was the most favored, but she had not gotten pregnant yet. The imperial physician's diagnosis of difficulty in getting pregnant became a topic of conversation after dinner. The happiest person was Suiyan. She was so happy when she heard the news. So what if you served the emperor the day before yesterday? Even if you served the emperor many times, it would be in vain if you can't get pregnant. Shuiyao showed a happy expression. Princess, you can rest assured to recuperate now. You can serve the emperor when your face is better. Suiyan stared at her face in the bronze mirror for a while and felt better than the day before. She ordered, bring some warm water. I want to wash my face and apply some ointment. I can serve the emperor as soon as I get better. I will go right away. Shuiyao happily went to fetch water. After Suiyan entered the Eastern Palace, Chang Liangyuan was very depressed these days because she knew that if nothing unexpected happened, Suiyan would be the future crown princess. My lady, I heard that concubine Shen is weak and it's not easy for her to get pregnant. Hui Xiang heard the news and couldn't wait to tell Chang Liangyuan. Chang Liangyuan grabbed Hui Xiang's hand and asked, are you sure you heard it right? Hui Xiang said, my lady, I didn't hear it wrong. It came from the queen's palace. It must be right. Chang Liangyuan gradually smiled, and the depression in her heart was finally relieved a lot. What does it matter if concubine Shen is favored? In the palace, if a woman can't get pregnant, what's the use of the great favor? Hui Xiang nodded in agreement. My lady is right. I see that concubine Shui is not favored either. She fell ill a few days after entering the East Palace and couldn't sleep with her.
When mentioning concubine Shui, Chang Liangyuan thought of the day when she lost the game and lost face. She ordered, "Huaixiang, come over here." Huaixiang lowered her head and came over, and Chang Liangyuan whispered a few words. Huaixiang nodded, "I know. The garden on the west side of the East Palace is full of flowers and green trees. I clearly took this road today, how come I can't find it? If the young lady knew, she would definitely scold me." Huaixiang stood on the road with her head down, looking like she was about to cry. When Shuiyao passed by, she heard someone talking, stopped and walked over, and saw Huaixiang and another maid looking for something. Huaixiang looked at the maid who was traveling with her. "Haven't you found it yet?" "Sister Huaixiang, I haven't found it," the maid asked while looking. "Sister Huaixiang, what is so important?" "It's a lucky bag for praying for a child. The old man specially prayed for the young lady at the Temple of Sound outside the palace. Put it next to the pillow when you sleep at night. It's very effective. Look for it quickly, or you will be scolded if you lose it." "Sister Huaixiang, could it be left in Zinlan Palace?" "That makes sense, go back and look for it." The two of them left in a hurry after talking. Shui Yao looked at the two people who had already walked away, and her eyes looked at the red lucky bag under the flowers. She took a few steps forward, bent down to pick it up, and looked at it in her palm for a long time. The red lucky bag had the words "praying for a child" embroidered on it with golden silk thread. Shui Yao happily took the lucky bag back to Kameng Hall and told Shui Yan what she saw on the way. Shui Yan asked, "Where is the lucky bag? Bring it to me to see." Shui Yao took out the lucky bag from her arms and eagerly handed it to Shui Yan. "Princess, this is it." Shui Yan picked up the lucky bag from her hand, turned it over and looked at it a few times, her eyes full of doubts. "Is this lucky bag really useful? I heard Huaixiang say that he has a nose and eyes. It should be true. If it were false, Huaixiang wouldn't cry anxiously," Shui Yao said. Shui Yan looked at the lucky bag in her hand, still a little unbelievable. Could she ask for a child? "Light time." A woman's crying voice came from Zinlan Palace. "If you can't even handle this little thing, what use do you have?" "Little master, this slave did not lose it on purpose." Shui Yao recognized that the voices were those of Chang Liangyuan and Huaixiang. She turned around and trotted back, relaying what she saw and heard to Shui Yan. "Princess, this slave looks like you are really useful." After hearing Shui Yao's words, Shui Yan now believed her. "That night when I go to bed, I will put it next to my pillow. After 2 days when my face feels better, I will ask His Highness to come over for dinner." Shui Yao said, "This slave will help the princess wash her face and apply ointment again so that she can regain her beauty as soon as possible." Hehuan Hall. After Shen Shuwei finished his dinner, he took out his drawing board and planned to draw. She agreed to Xiao Jinyan's painting of two people, but she never started painting because she had no inspiration. Xiao Jinyan finished reviewing the memorial and came to Hehuan Hall early, planning to work hard to get Xiaju pregnant with the child as soon as possible. "Good evening, my dears. Acting coquettishly and cute, please support me with monthly votes and recommendation votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 289. When I walked in, I saw Shen Shuwei sitting in front of the desk. She was holding a drawing board in her hand, as if she was drawing. When Xiao Jinyan got closer, he found that there was a blank piece of paper on the drawing board, but no writing was done. "What are Xiaju going to draw?" Shen Shuwei raised his head after hearing the words and saw Xiao Jinyan standing behind him. He was slender and wearing a black brocade robe. Under the candle light, the dark patterns of gold threads on the brocade robe were looming, and there was a cold aura in his noble aura.
Didn't I promise to paint a double portrait for His Highness? I am currently composing the painting, she said, placing the drawing board on the desk, and then stood up. Xiao Jinyan had seen Shen Chu's micro-paintings for half a month or even longer. If you didn't tell me, I thought you had already started painting, but it turns out you haven't started yet. Shen Chu said slightly, painting also requires inspiration, otherwise the painting will be less realistic. Xiao Jinyan asked, then when you painted this palace, was it because you had inspiration? Shen Chu nodded slightly. When I painted the first painting, it was entirely because Xiao Jinyan's face was so handsome that it would not be an exaggeration to say that it is rare to see it in 4,000 years. As a beauty artist and painter, of course she can draw if she has the material. The second painting was drawn because I thought the picture of Xiao Jinyan reading was so beautiful, so I couldn't help but draw it. Xiao Jinyan hugged her into his arms. Xiao Tian's clothes were thin, and he could clearly feel the warmth and softness of the skin under his palms. Shen Chuwei took out the drawing board after taking a shower and couldn't sleep for a while, so she only wore suspender shorts and pajamas, which were cool and comfortable. Xiao Jinyan's slender hair pushed her hair behind her shoulders, revealing her fair and moist shoulders. Since you need inspiration, take your time and don't rush. Needless to say, Xiao Jinyan said that Shen Chuwei's temperament was not in a hurry. The purpose of painting was to satisfy his own needs, not to add to his worries. Otherwise, drawing a portrait will feel like completing the task and be lifeless. The weather was hot, and Shen Chuwei was even hotter when she was held in her arms. Your Highness, I will undress you. She lowered her eyes and landed on the belt inlaid with white jade, and reached out to pull the buckle with her fingers. Xiao Jinyan looked down at her and let her pull off the belt. The jade pendant made a jingling sound when it touched the buckle of the belt. The pink sachet also rippled with her movements. Shen Chuwei saw the pink sachet, which matched the white color of the moon, but the black brocade robe did not match it. Summer clothing materials are much thinner than spring and winter clothing materials, making them easy to take off and not heavy. After taking off his clothes, Xiao Jinyan went to take a bath. Shen Chuwei took off his shoes and lay on the bed, continuing to study the recipe. The weather is hot, so it's important to study how to eat cold drinks in ancient times. When Xiao Jinyan came out of the bath, he saw Shen Chuwei lying on the bed again, holding a book in his hand. He had a good memory and recognized it as a recipe at a glance. Are you studying eating again? He walked to the bed and sat down. He looked sideways and found that this book was different from the last time. Shen Chu said slightly, well, food is the most important thing for the people. If you study more, it will be the welfare of summer. We'll see tomorrow. Xiao Jinyan reached out and took away the recipe from her hand. He glanced at the pattern on it and found that it was something strange that he had never seen before. The paper is smooth and I don't know where it comes from. Shen Chuwei didn't protest because it was rest time. That's fine, it's rest time now, don't let reading disturb your sleep. As Shen Chuwei was talking, he saw Xiao Jinyan put down his books and instead of lying down next to him, he turned over. His long dark hair was slanting down. He had just finished bathing and his hair was slightly wet. Even if he doesn't mince words at this moment, he still knows what he wants to do. She said earnestly, Your Highness, combine work and rest. Xiao Jinyan put one hand on the side of her head and untied her clothes with the other. My mother is urging me to have an heir. Let's work hard first. As an art student, Shen Chuwei would look at a beautiful man with admiration when he saw him taking off his clothes. Seeing him leaning down and kissing her, she couldn't help but ask, what if I really can't get pregnant? There are many people who are healthy but not pregnant. In modern times, some couples will divorce for this reason, and then remarry and both parties have children, which means there is no problem for both parties. Xiao Jinyan paused, looked at the person close at hand, and said slowly, if you can't, don't force it. Having children is the icing on the cake. If you don't have one, it won't have any impact. Shen Shuwei originally just asked casually, but she got an affirmative answer, which made her stunned for a long time. But you are going to be the emperor in the future, so what will you do if you don't have any heirs? Don't worry, I will take care of all this. Xiao Jinyan kissed her lips. Let's work hard first. Having a child is the icing on the cake. The point is, the current troubles can be solved. Shen Shuwei asked again, I mean, if I can't give birth, what will you do if you want to have children in the future? Xiao Jinyan looked at her steadily. You don't believe me? Shen Chu raised his chin slightly. Concubine, this is called preparing for a rainy day. Xiao Jinyan didn't know whether to laugh at her for being smart or angry that she didn't trust him. After all, you still don't believe in me. Shen Shuwei consoled him. Your Highness, trust can sometimes be a burden. Xiao Jinyan looked at her doubtfully. How can this be a burden? Shen Shuwei explained, I trust your Highness. If your Highness breaks your trust, I will be disappointed. Your Highness will remember this trust. If you make a choice in the future involuntarily, if you choose either my concubine, you will break your trust. People who value love and justice will feel guilty. This is a two-way burden. Xiao Jinyan felt that it made sense. What you said makes sense. Shen Shuwei raised the corners of his lips proudly because he rarely spoke at length, and then heard Xiao Jinyan say, don't be too proud, you are only half right. If there is no trust between husband and wife, they will not go far, do you understand? Shen Chu's slightly raised smile gradually disappeared. In terms of eloquence, she still couldn't compare to Xiao Jinyan. It is undeniable that the 20-year-old Xiao Jinyan is rich in knowledge and mature in thinking, which is incomparable to some modern youths. The only drawback is that sometimes in front of him, I feel like a student who made a mistake, and he is the teacher who corrects me. For example now. Her tirade was dismissed by the serious teacher. So what if I let her be proud once? Having said that, as a modern person, she really couldn't accept that her husband slept with other women. Xiao Jinyan is her husband in her eyes. Even if he has to have sex with another woman in the future because he needs an heir to stabilize his position as prince, she still couldn't accept it. It's just that this is ancient times, and it's as difficult as climbing to heaven for a man to keep his integrity. It is still necessary to plan ahead. Seeing her silence, Xiao Jinyan raised her chin with his slender fingers. What's wrong? You don't agree with what I said. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 290. Under these charming and powerful eyes, Shen Chu felt slightly oppressed. It is said that one cannot bend with force, but it is understandable to bend occasionally. Everything your highness said is right. Xiao Jinyan looked satisfied. Then you will cooperate with me in working hard, okay? He's so handsome, who can stand up to him? How can I cooperate? I'll teach you. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the sling on her body, still feeling that it was convenient without a belly band. Xiao Jinyan thought for a day and prepared for the worst. Without heirs, there will be more obstacles on the road, it will be more difficult, and it will not be impossible to go on. If there is a need for an heir in the future, just ask Xiao Jinyu to adopt his eldest son to him when he gets married. This is the worst plan. Although it will be difficult to implement, there is always a way to solve it as long as you persist. In all her life, Shen Shuwei never imagined that she would be faced with the embarrassing dilemma of giving birth to a child urgently. Seeing a certain man enjoying himself so much, she seriously suspected that he was acting for personal gain. On the second and third days, Xiao Jinyan will come on time. Shen Shuwei held Xiao Jinyan's hand and said seriously, Your Highness, are we trying too hard? Xiao Jinyan untied his clothes and asked slowly, Are you happy? Shen Chu shook his head slightly. Xiao Jinyan pressed down with his body, then keep working hard. Shen Chu was slightly on the verge of crying but had no tears. Ancient times were really not meant for humans. How could anyone have a baby at such a young age? Also, Xiao Jinyan is really not a human being. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the tearful person. Xiaju, have I bullied you again? Shen Chu shed tears. I know you still bully me. Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and kissed her tearful eyes. I'll prepare a crystal elbow for you tomorrow. Shen Chuwei's tears stopped and she said, how can a bare crystal elbow be enough? Xiao Jinyan chuckled, I'll buy you some tea fruit. Shen Chu burst into tears and smiled, that's pretty much it? Xiao Jinyan wiped away the tears from her eyes with her long fingers, you are so coaxing. A word to wake up the dreamer. I also feel that my requirements are too low, Shen Chuwei said in a non-negotiable tone, so I added various flavors of meat cakes, candied haws, skin cakes, and tea fruits. Xiao Jinyan suppressed a smile and nodded, okay. After Shen Chuwei's wish was fulfilled, she felt sleepy. She grabbed Xiao Jinyan's arm and said, I'm sleepy. It'll be fine soon. Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and kissed her lips soothingly. Shen Chuwei naively thought it was right away, but in fact, what Xiao Jinyan said was wait. The next day, Kimeng Palace. Princess, your highness has been staying at Hehuan Hall for the past 2 days. Shui Yan checked that the red rash on her face had mostly healed, and she was in a good mood. Before she could raise her smile, she heard this sentence and her expression immediately changed. Your Highness, don't you need to review the memorial? I went to Hehuan Hall after reviewing the memorial. His Highness doesn't seem busy these days, Shui Yao guessed. Shui Yan said bitterly, Shen Liangdi clearly took advantage of my unwellness to deliberately dominate His Highness. Shui Yao advised, Princess, please calm down. Even if Shen Liangdi stays with her a few more times, it will be useless. The inability to conceive a child is a flaw and cannot threaten the princess. Even so, thinking that she had dominated His Highness for several nights, Shui Yan was still extremely angry. It's really shameless. Shui Yao said warmly, Princess, please look at your face. No matter how angry Shui Yan was, she would look at her face carefully. She asked Shui Yao to take a look at her face. Shui Yao looked at it carefully for a while and said, Princess's face is much better than the previous 2 days. She should be fully recovered in 2 days. Apply more ointment. Shui Yan couldn't hold it any longer. She couldn't let Shen Liangdi dominate His Highness all the time. Asterisk. Shen Chuwei came back to life thanks to Chun 11's life extension. Thinking of what Xiao Jinyan did in the past 2 days, she was even more sure that he was acting for public benefit. She sighed. She worked hard every day, but who could bear it? Concubine Su came in waving her handkerchief. Before she saw Shen Chuwei, she asked, Shen Liangdi, is it true that it is said that you have difficulty conceiving? Shen Chuwei lay on the bed and didn't want to move. He looked up at Concubine Su. Did the news spread so quickly? Concubine Su sat down by the bed. This information is not confidential, just use money. Shen Chuwei didn't know about the bribery before, but now she knows, but she's not interested. She said nonchalantly, you'll know if you know. Concubine Su looked at Shen Chuwei worriedly. Seeing that he was so lazy, she subconsciously thought that she was shocked and depressed. Has the imperial doctor seen it? Can it be treated? It's okay, just take care of it and you'll be fine. She has always taken the prescription to treat it, but only twice a month. The main reason is that it's too bitter and she doesn't like to drink it. I think they are just spreading rumors, saying this deliberately so that the rain and dew will be shared by the Highness. Concubine Su was indignant. At this time, the imperial study room. After Xiao Jinyan attended the morning court, he was sent to the imperial study by the emperor. In the huge imperial study room, only the emperor sat in front of the desk. Xiao Jinyan took a few steps forward to greet him, Father. The prince is here. The emperor put down the memorial in his hand and looked up at Xiao Jinyan in front of the desk. You have worked hard for me during this period. You have reviewed a lot of memorials for me and handled them in an orderly manner. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded. My father is overly praised. It is my honor to be able to relieve my father's worries. The emperor said quietly, I have seen everything the prince has done. The prince's ability should not be underestimated, and he should be able to stand on his own. Xiao Jinyan listened humbly. The emperor said again, a few days ago, your mother mentioned the issue of offspring. Have you thought it through? Xiao Jinyan said, my father, I just want to share your worries and troubles. I am not in a hurry about offspring. I know my limits. The emperor was shocked when he heard this. As the crown prince, I have no children. Outsiders are talking about it. It is better to make plans early and don't give people a chance to talk about it. Xiao Jinyan, I understand. Since Shen Liangdi is not easy to conceive, then Shui concubine, Su concubine, Chang Liangyuan, and others should share the reign and do. Don't let me down again. The emperor deliberately emphasized the last sentence to show that his patience was limited. Xiao Jinyan knew that his father had issued an ultimatum. If there was no news in the next few days, I am afraid. At night, Xiao Jinyan went straight to Hehuan and took the back door. The back door was installed after the two walls were specially opened. It is very hidden and cannot be found by ordinary people. Shen Chuwei's heavy body in slippers taught Chengzi to make summer cold drinks today, but it was a pity that she almost succeeded. She planned to try again tomorrow. When Xiao Jinyan came in, he saw Shen Chuwei sitting cross-legged on the bed. Seeing him coming, she looked over with a smile. Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan came to the bed and sat down, looking at Shen Chuwei's belly, and his big hand also reached out to touch the flat belly. Shen Chuwei looked down at Xiao Jinyan's actions. Xiao Jinyan had done this action several times. When he felt uncomfortable during menstruation, he would put his hand on it to warm his belly. Good night, baby. I'm too sleepy and the writing is not good. My babies will just read it. I'm acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets for support. If there are more tickets, I will add more.